Without talking directly about what the subject is, I would have you study it deeply. But rather, I'm going to talk about the effects that it can have on various circumstances based off of your upbringing, your background, and your tendencies towards certain things. Solipsism. If you have a simple understanding of this concept and the fact that the only reality is the one you're projecting and creating in your own consciousness, that simplistic viewpoint, then you might come to the conclusion that solipsism equals narcissism. Now, I cannot talk about the experiences behind it and the various ways that a person can take this concept and apply it to their own lives without firstly explaining my experience with this concept. The first time that I had heard it presented to me, it was under a neutral to positive connotation of the subject, whereas I know now, after studying it further and seeing people's immediate response to the smaller concepts within it, especially on short form presentations of the subject, they jump simply to, yes, solipsism equals narcissism. And that can certainly be the case. I'm not discounting that at all, because that is something to actually look out for very, very carefully. But from my personal experience of those who tend towards narcissism, I would think that if a narcissist came across the concept of solipsism, they would take the simplistic viewpoint, they would see it in a short form presentation, they would not really dive very deeply into the topic and explore it very well. Unless, of course, they had an underlying personal reason to do so that would uplift themselves and bring someone else down. Which I feel like there's way more ways to do that outside of exploring concepts. I don't know. If they're somehow going to use it for a justification of their negative actions towards other people, boom, that's a perfect, easy, fast way they are going to use it. And of course, everybody has different temperaments, everybody has different ways they view the world, and depending on the background you come from, like if you are already viewing the world as revolving around yourself for years on end, on top of that, willing to harm others and bulldoze others on your way to get to what you want, solipsism will be fantastic justification for your negative action towards other people. The fact that your reality is the only one that is real makes you think, I'm not actually hurting anyone, who cares? And honestly, like a narcissist, they probably would not. I don't know. It depends on the level. It depends on the level you're at. It depends on a lot of things. But like, if it did hurt a person and the reality wasn't the only one there, then they also wouldn't care if they were hurting people either. So like either way, like a narcissist is gonna be a narcissist. Like a narcissist is gonna narcissist. And if this is another justification that they can find to be a narcissist, they're gonna use it. But then let's pretend you have like other end of the spectrum. Somebody who is, maybe they call themselves an empath. They like see another person outside of themselves on a street corner, and they like literally imagine that themselves in that person's position. And like every person they see, they do this with. They're not like actually imagining themselves in their own body. They're constantly going outside of themselves. They're constantly finding distractions and things away from themselves, even if it's a good altruistic form of doing so. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but like people constantly saying, I'm doing service, I'm gonna self-sacrifice, I'm gonna do everything for other people, I'm not gonna think about myself at all, I'm not gonna do any kind of self-care. Ooh, well, that's where that person needs to get a little bit more into the realization that their consciousness is actually creating all of that, because they're not in somebody else's consciousness doing that. And maybe it's important to come more towards themselves and accept the truth and the reality of their own consciousness, so that perhaps they can also, like, if you're a service kind of person, you can serve others more if you actually do this, because you'll have, the oxygen mask analogy that everybody knows on the airplane. You put your own oxygen mask on first before you go and put it on somebody else. You tap into your own consciousness first and realize that before you go into trying to see everything from another person's perspective. Now, is there such thing as telepathy? I don't know. Like, maybe you can actually feel and see how another person's feeling and feel it yourself. I definitely have experiences of, like, somebody getting a cut and I physically feel it too. But still, it's only me feeling that, and only me seeing that that person felt that, and only me perceiving that perhaps I'm trying to empathize with their pain. Like, you see how this can get really complicated. But I would recommend, I'm not even talking about like actual solipsism here, I'm just like talking about experiences and stuff, But like a dangerous viewpoint to think about solipsism is what is kind of obvious, honestly, that it is only your perspective and it discounts literally everybody else's experience around you. It just completely makes it 100% irrelevant and unimportant. I mean, like, if you're going like that far into solipsism and only seeing like the surface level of solipsism in that way, yeah, like, don't go down that road too much, Like, I'm directly talking about the experience of it and directly talking about how you would apply it to the way you think, because not that I think you can have thought crimes necessarily, but if you have too many thoughts that you think over and over again, it's highly more likely that you could direct those thoughts into creating something in reality and influencing others in certain ways. And so, yeah, like if you're into some of these concepts, that's why you like go study about them deeply. Like, don't just and then like think how they could possibly apply to your life, and if you applied them to your life, like what might happen. Like think about those things, Think of all the positive things that could happen, think of all the negative things that could happen, think of all the neutral things that could happen in applying any belief system whatsoever. And yeah, I think that if someone is taught for an entire lifetime, perhaps under a very dogmatic, I said that word weirdly. But yeah, like if they're like taught to only think of others, mothers who are inclined towards constantly caring for an infant's needs, would in fact, especially like during pregnancy, do well to think of their own needs and to project their reality onto the fact that like how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing is the realest, most visceral thing possible, which does kind of play into solipsism. And when they realize that, when a mother realizes that, she can then go into realizing that, well, how she feels directly also influences her infant child. And so I wouldn't take solipsism on its own, but if you take solipsism with a concept of oneness, you've got a lot of power there, in fact. You've got more ability to help people if you take it with a concept that everything is one, that everything affects everything. So yeah, explore these concepts. Explore them deeply.